Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for this special film screening of The 50. My name is William Roberts, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Rights and Justice at the Center for American Progress. As you will see today, The 50 is a compelling documentary film that delves into the lives of 50 individuals who have undergone transformational journeys. The stories invite us to witness the power of second chances, the profound impact of forgiveness, and the possibility of redemption. The film is particularly relevant this evening as we are gathered virtually on the last day of Second Chance Month. April's Second Chance Month is a time dedicated to raising awareness of the challenges faced by individuals impacted by America's criminal legal system and advocating for policies that provide returning individuals with an opportunity to successfully rejoin their communities and build toward a meaningful future. Today, having a prosperous future can feel like an insurmountable aspiration to obtain for the roughly 1 in 3 adults in America with an arrest record or conviction. The collateral consequences of a record can last a lifetime and negatively impact nearly every area of life, including the chance of earning gainful employment, finding stable housing, pursuing educational opportunities, and even accessing adequate physical and mental health support. Marginalized communities, including people of color, people with disabilities, and people living in poverty, often face these negative impacts at disproportionate rates. These obstacles can create significant barriers for the millions of people who leave jail and prison each year to return to their communities, and can ultimately increase their chances of reoffending or perpetuating a cycle of incarceration. Unfortunately, the impacts of involvement in the legal system do not stop with the individual themselves. Today, roughly half of children in the United States have at least one parent with a record, which can hinder areas like school performance, education, and even future earnings. And households with either a currently or previously incarcerated family member have around 50% less wealth than households not affected by incarceration, which in turn continues to be a significant driver of multi-generational poverty and racial inequality. The idea of second chances is rooted in the idea that no human being should ever be forever defined by the mistakes they've made in their life, and everyone has the right to strive for their highest human potential, uninhibited. As a societal issue, the onus is on policymakers, community advocates, and government leaders alike to pursue measures that support the reentry process and foster successful integration. Programs like the California Department of Corrections Offender Mentor Certificate Program, which you will learn more about in today's film, aim to do just that by taking a comprehensive approach to reentry support while an individual is still incarcerated. After the film concludes, we hope you will stay for our panel discussion, where we'll be joined by the film's director, Brenton Gieser, co-founder of OMCP Saul Irving, and member of the 50, Roensch. Akua Amaning, director of criminal justice reform at CAP, will moderate the discussion, exploring the broader societal implications of second chances and the benefits of embracing a more inclusive and compassionate approach to justice. Beyond today's event, I hope each of you will consider ways in which we can all contribute to creating a society that values redemption, rehabilitation, and second chances. I hope you enjoy the film.
Hello. Welcome to our panel discussion segment of today's film screening event. Thank you for joining us. My name's Akua Amaning, and I'm Director for the Criminal Justice Reform Team here at CAP. Today, I'm joined by my esteemed panelists, Brenton Gieser, Director of the film The 50, Saul Irving, co-founder of the Offender Mentor Certification Program, and Roensch, a certified drug and alcohol counselor and member of the 50. I want to thank you all for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Akua.
Yeah, thank you.
So if you're ready, we'll dive into our discussion. And I'd like to start with Brenton. So as we saw, The 50 is a powerful documentary about the journey of recovery and rehabilitation for the first 50 participants of California's Offender Mentor Certification Program, or OMCP. OMCP. So aside from reentry and rehabilitation, there are a lot of themes that are captured in this film, which include mass incarceration, mental health and addiction, healing, support, the list goes on. Brenton, why did you choose to pursue this film project? And given the themes surrounding the documentary, why do you feel this film is so important today?
Yeah, that's a great question to start us out. I think I'll start with myself. I think for me personally, the theme that kind of connects with me the most on a personal level is really the mental health aspect. Also, some of the childhood trauma elements that we really kind of dive into on each individual character. I think those are things that, like I said, I relate to personally, have had personal experience with both. And I think when I first met the guys, when I first met Randy, Cameron, Al, and some of the other members of the 50 that you saw in the film, I saw men who went through a process of deep personal evaluation into some of their past lives, essentially, right? They evaluated it to the extent in these therapeutic communities, or in a therapeutic community and space, in a way that there was an opportunity for really care, connection, and potential healing on the other side. And so when I took this on, as a filmmaker, as a person who hasn't been system impacted, but has family members who have been and are, and also have family members that have deep histories with alcohol abuse, or excuse me, drug and alcohol abuse, I'll say. Me on the mental health end, I saw kind of an opportunity to really learn from a group of men that I really honestly looked up to. And I thought that phenomenon was interesting, as a group of guys that I think many people in society may look at as maybe irredeemable. I think depending on which era we really kind of look at this group in, specifically. But I saw them as a model for people that I could learn from, people that would teach me how to be a better human, a better man, because they shine the light into their darkest spots and really kind of went through this process of understanding and healing, with the purpose of giving that back to others. And that came back to me too, as the filmmaker, which I feel very grateful for. So that was really my entry in. And I hope with all audience members and the people that watch it tonight, that the stories kind of provide a mirror back to them in their own ways, right? I think we all are on our own journeys to be the best versions of ourselves, or to be, maybe if that's a little too high of a bar to clear, to find peace, to find healing, to find connection or strength, whatever it is, to just live that better life. And I think that these guys are a great model that shows that it is possible in even some of the most extreme scenarios.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So Saul, I want to turn it over to you now. So you co-founded the OMCP program, and at the time it was the first of its kind in California. And in the film, you speak about some of the challenges that came from developing the program model, which I imagine this process required a lot of gaining buy-in and, and support from various stakeholders, including many of the incarcerated individuals in the system. So can you speak to how you overcame some of those challenges that arose from developing and implementing the program, and why you felt the program was necessary or important to see through at the time?
I had a history, my work history. I think I've done everything in a prison. I started out in accounting, and I've acted as the acting warden on several occasions, 2 or 3 times a year, and so I've done everything. I've been an internal affair investigator, a counselor, sergeant, lieutenant. I've done all that stuff. So I was given the opportunity to do something that no one has ever done. I was over a substance abuse program. I had 400 inmates, and I'm trying to treat these guys. 85% of the inmates that are in prison are part of the drug culture, right? And so I was given the opportunity to manage this, but it wasn't working, to be quite honest with you. It was at a time when we in the Department of Corrections were overcrowded. We had 162,000 inmates, but we really only had beds for 93,000. And so we were triple bunking, we're putting them in the gym and whatever. And the court system got into it. They basically said we were housing these inmates and it was inhumane. And so I start looking and I'm going like, okay, I got these guys in here, but it's not really working. And so I had an opportunity. You know, I prayed about it and whatever. And Governor Schwarzenegger was our governor. And he took on the problem and he brought together this expert panel of experts and put them in this room, and they were trying to figure it out. All right. Well, my boss, you know, Director Thomas Powers calls me and said, "Hey, Saul, we want you to be a part of this." They had been meeting for like 2 weeks. So I walk in there and I'm like, okay, I'm intimidated. I'm going like, doctor here, doctor there, Stanford, Harvard, and whatever. And so I kind of listened for about 3 days, and all of a sudden I got this holy boldness that basically said, look, that ain't going to work. If it was me, I would put a program in where inmates can help other inmates, right? In other words, an inmate is going to listen to another inmate before they listen to me. So why don't we train these inmates, and in my case, to be substance abuse counselors, right? Give them some training and let them help each other, all right? And so I get back to the office and get a call from the secretary and the director and said, "Oh, Saul, you were a hit." And they gave us a couple $100,000, right? And okay, now we got to start this program, right? But interviewing, like I interviewed Al, and you know, the process of you got to write 500-word essay and interviews, and you know, we're going to ask you some questions to talk about your crime and all that. We interviewed 180 people. We picked 50. So I got the 50 in there, and I realized, you know what? These are 50 inmates, but in order for us to get to them, to do what we need to do, is that we're going to have to deal with trauma. And all these guys were traumatized, right? We were lucky to pick the United States Navy Drug and Alcohol Counseling School. And they were the experts in the parallel process. And to explain the parallel process is that we're going to teach you a skill set to be a drug and alcohol counselor, but you got to work on yourself, right? So, and Al will tell you, we start looking at the working on themselves, and we realized there was trauma there. And, but they were the experts. And so we did a couple of groups. I don't know if you were in that first group, Al, but we got 10, 12 of them together, and we put some Kleenex in the middle, and we started trying to break them down and whatever. And they all cried. And I'm like, oh, these are grown men. You know, we got the white supremacists, we got the Crips, the Bloods, all these gangs, and they're sitting in a circle crying. And, you know, we realized the model is these guys are in for thinking errors. We call it criminal thinking. But the thinking errors results in negative behavior, right? So in order for us to change this individual, we got to change their thinking, and that thinking is going to change their behavior. But we got to go back, like Brenton was saying. We got to go back to, I call it the innocent child, right? And we make them feel how did you feel when you were that innocent child, and take them up to the time they reached that trauma, right? And then we're working them through that. They're talking about the trauma. Some of that stuff has been buried for years and whatever. And this whole thing is a healing process, right? So that was the model. Dealing with, because of the position I was at, you know, I can run things. You know, I had the knucklehead officers and stuff that tried to sabotage or whatever, and I had to sit them down and said, "You better not. Nope, I'll ship you. I don't care." And so then we shut down the prison, and we did a training session with all the staff, right? The second thing I had to do is I had to go to some of the gang leaders and say, I got these 50 guys, don't touch it, right? You know, I've sent people to our super max. You know, I've got that kind of ability and skill set. Do not touch them. And so working with the staff, kind of basically talking to them and kind of, okay, this is what we're going to do and whatever, and then dealing with the staff, and then we start. And the rest is history.
The rest is history. Wow, that's amazing. So turning over to Al, first I just want to thank you for sharing your story with us. It was very impactful and compelling. And as a member of the first, or of the 50, the first to do this program, what led you to pursue this opportunity to join the program, which had never been done before? And what did you hope to gain?
Gosh, when I think back to, and this is almost 15 years ago now, but at the time, it just seemed like a great idea. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I don't think any of us did. It was something new, and it was something that there was a lot of buzz on the yard when the flyers went out and all of these opportunities came before us. I really, looking back at the time, like I say, that it was something that I just dumbly walked into that turned out to be this incredible opportunity. And at the time, so many of us were looking for something new. We were looking for something that would generate that hope and that healing. And this seemed like the opportunity. Just the flyers that were being passed around the yard, this seemed like it was something that the prison had never seen. And I think in that, so many people were excited. I mean, there was this buzz about this new program. And even though we didn't understand exactly what it was, so many of us, and I think staff would say this too, is that we were all stepping out in faith, because we didn't know what it was going to look like. We didn't know what it was going to look like from the start. We didn't know what it was going to look like at the end, but we were continually stepping out in faith and trusting that process. And it's really why it's been a gift to me personally. And I think 50 of us would say the exact same thing, is that this was an opportunity that we thought initially that it was going to be this opportunity professionally in a career-wise for a job. But what we didn't realize at the time is that this was something that was about hope and healing for us. And that's one of the overall themes of the 50. When you watch the 50, is that there's hope and there's healing. And it's almost like that, it's that infinity loop. It's that there's hope in the healing, and there's healing in the hope. And I'll ever be grateful for the opportunity that I was given personally, when I didn't realize stepping into it. I thought it was something for a vocation, but this was something that was going to be part of my healing journey as well.
Mm. Now, following up on that, is watching the film, I can only imagine that the program really required you to like put in the work, right, so to speak, for it to be truly successful. And Saul just spoke to it, and in the film you speak to it as well, about aspects of the program that really require a lot of vulnerability and self-reflection, which I imagine would be difficult for anyone. Yet alone individuals who are already incarcerated and have a lot of guards up and walls built. So I'm wondering what supports were available to you both during the program and after, that helped you in completing the process.
Absolutely. During the program is when I really noticed it, because this was the initial learning to identify criminal and addictive thinking and behaviors, identifying trauma. So within the program, especially initially, there were several people. There were counselors. The Navy was there as they trained us. They were also there just as that support. But we had doctors, we had nurses, we had therapists coming in regularly. We even had coaches come in just to make sure that we were doing okay, because I for one can tell you this, and not realizing what we were stepping into, they were asking us to look at ourselves. They were asking us to look at our past. They were asking us to look at our trauma. They were asking us to really look at who we've been and who we are, which includes things like taking responsibility for your crime, looking at victim impact, looking at trauma and abuse from childhood. So all of that opens you up for all kinds of more emotions, and looking at core values and core beliefs, pain and hurt. And that's why I love that there's hope and there's healing. So there was tremendous support for us from the top down, from Saul and Tom, all the way to the counselors, the therapists, the coaches, the teachers, the instructors, the Navy. Everybody was there to support us. And throughout, especially most of the guys paroled out to Berkeley, and that's where there was support for them on the outside as well. And you're seeing it more and more as more of the offender mentor certification program graduates are being released from prison, that more of California is being, there's an influx of healthier individuals who are paroling and going back out to the society.
Oh, great. So, coming back to you, Saul, since its implementation, OMCP has really produced some great outcomes. It seems like we've seen over 500 individuals have successfully graduated from the program. We've seen recidivism rates amongst the participants with just 1% recidivism rate, in comparison to recidivism rates of 50% in the whole state of California in the last decade, which is amazing. And the program is now in 7 facilities throughout California. And as mentioned at the end of the film, California is continuing to invest in these models. So my question here is twofold. One, what do you feel has contributed to the ongoing success of the program? And then two, for advocates and policymakers like myself who might be interested in, helping establish programs like OMCP in their own areas, how would you advise that we try and build support for similar programs?
It's interesting when Al and those groups, out of that 50, 44 were lifers. They were doing a life term. That's 5 to life, 15 to life, 10 to life, or whatever. And at the time, these lifers were not getting out of prison.
Mm-hmm.
There was no governor was going to sign some, okay, get out of prison pass, because they didn't want them to get out, commit a crime, and that's the end of their career, right? And so, Al, I don't know if you remember this, but I brought the whole board of prison commissioners down to our building, and they were there with us for 2 days. And so it's interesting, we're walking through the yard going to the building, and you had all these other lifers on the yard, about 1,000, and they're looking, and hey, that's the guy that denied me, wouldn't let me go, or whatever. Now they're walking into prison into our building, which made a lot of news throughout the institution, right? But they looked at what these guys were doing, right? Now you got to remember, if I say an inmate is getting 5 years to life, he's being seen 2 years before that 5th year, right? Mm-hmm. And then every 3 years he's coming back, and they're deciding if they're going to. So they looked at these inmates, right, and these mentors, and they saw, hey, there's a change going on. So now they had an opportunity to let them out of prison, and then they start letting them out. Now, the only problem I had is I had every lifer, there was like 35,000 of them in the state of California wanted to get on our program, and we only had one program, right? And you're right, we have expanded to 7 different prisons. And let me correct you, we've trained almost 1,000 inmates, right? Both men and women, and our recidivism rate is less than 1. In other words, out of that 1,000, 2 of them came back to prison.
Wow.
All right, so it's good. People are seeing, again, I talked a little earlier before we start taping, is if you are a government official and you're looking at the benefits of this program, let's get down to the nuts and bolts. It's about money, right? So we're going to save you a whole lot of money. Not only that, these guys are getting out with a skill. They've changed, and they are helping people, homeless folks in San Francisco and Sacramento, Bay Area, LA. They're going and dealing with at-risk kids. They're helping them. They're helping addicts and alcoholics and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's expanding. Brent has set up where I think we've visited 10 different states in the United States. I went down and talked to the folks down at the Capitol. You know, at the time, Senator Feinstein and Senator Harris, Kamala Harris, sat in their office and talked about this. Was 7, 8, 9 years ago. Now we have a documentary. Now you can see the impact of it. And so we're realizing that a lot of states want to do it. And so what I've got a meeting in a couple of hours after this with some of the trainers from the Navy, right? And some of the folks that were in the beginning, you know, and we've got folks all over the United States that if we decided to do in this state, we could go and do it. So the model's there, you know, we know what it costs, we know all that. We just have to get it all together and do it. But the impact it has on the community. One last thing, and I'll shut up.
No, please keep going.
I'm at Brenton and I were at. I was there too. We were at a showing they had in Sacramento, and afterwards, you know, you're talking to everybody in the audience and whatever. And so a young lady came up and said, wanted to hug me. I'm going like, okay. She says, "Thank you for bringing my dad home." And I'm like, whoa. He said, when he went into prison, I was a little baby, right? But you brought him home. And I'm so proud of him. He's out doing this and that. And that's not the first time that's happened to me. You just sit there and, oh, here's my husband, or here's my wife, or here's my dad, or here's my uncle, or whatever. And so they blossom. You know, I promised one thing, and I haven't done it yet. I told them, when you guys get out, I'm going to get you a tie. So you can walk around and look, you know, and I still owe them a tie, but they're running programs, they're helping people all over the United States. It's just, but yeah, I see, and talking to Brenton, some of the mentors and stuff like that. Yeah, we could model this in any state in the United States, not only in prison, but out in the community. Start doing things in that community. And so we've got folks working with the homeless, and they tell me all the things they do, and I'm like, wow. In fact, I was talking to one of them, and the district attorney and the police department in San Francisco, when they had a crisis situation, they come to them. Hey, can you go in there and deal? We don't want to go in there and shoot anybody. Can you guys see if you could go in there and do some crisis intervention so we can get this guy? And I'm like, yeah, okay. You know, so it's phenomenal. And thank you, Brenton, for deciding to put this on film. And I think one of the things we do is when I go into these filming, I like to sit in the middle. I don't like to sit up with VIPs. And people are crying. I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, tears are coming because they really don't know what goes on in prison, right? And they realize, a lot of them, is that there's hurt there, right? There's anger there. I mean, all of us have gone through some stuff that we internalize stuff, right? And so here's an opportunity. Brenton said redemption. We've given a map of redemption, of changing. Deal with that hurt. Deal with that stuff. Because if you don't, it affects you for the rest of your life, right? It affects your thinking. It affects your behavior. But go back and deal with the stuff if you can. And the victimization, yeah, these guys have asked for forgiveness, right, for the people they victimized, but they also forgave the people that victimized them when they were kids. And so between those two, it's part of that healing process.
Yeah. I think that's one of the beautiful things about the film. When I was watching, is just, I think you can you can see aspects, everyone can see aspects of themselves in someone that was in the film, whether you've been incarcerated yourself before or have not been. And I think that's really where you see the humanity in it all. So it's
Thank
great.
you, Akua.
Yeah, so Al, I want to come back to you. So we a lot of the times hear about the challenges that so many people face when they're returning to their families and communities after serving time in the system, right? So
Mhm.
a lot of the times people have trouble finding employment, um, housing, education opportunities, healthcare, and without, reentry services and resources, these challenges can be really overwhelming for individuals and can even lead to, recidivism or, going back into
Mhm.
into the system. Um, but with your story, you seemingly have overcome a lot of these challenges, and not to say that you haven't faced them, but um, you've been out of the carceral system for over 10 years, and
Mhm.
you're a certified drug and alcohol counselor and minister in your church. So
Mhm.
you're really doing all these great things. Um, I'm wondering, how did the OMCP impact your reintegration back into society? And how have you used the tools and resources that you learned in the program to end the cycle of system involvement?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a difficult process, especially early on, the reentry back into society. Um, Especially for me, uh, employment was very difficult, even with certification. Um, and it took me years before I was actually back into the drug and alcohol counseling field. But when I first paroled, I felt like an alien back out in society. I was incarcerated for 17 years. So when I first came out, I felt very alone and isolated and like an alien. And what happened was the things that helped me through it were definitely my church. They welcomed me with open arms, even when I told them about my past. Emotional regulation was a huge something that I learned from the OMCP and going through all the training. For me, having an emotional regulation, meaning that just because I was thinking something or feeling something, because I'm the kind of guy that easily would just act out on my emotions, which you see in the crime that I committed. I was feeling angry and rejected, so I thought I had to make people feel hurt like I did. But what the OMCP gave me was that in the parallel process, I learned that just because I was feeling something, I didn't have to act on it. I could breathe. I could have these coping skills to where I can breathe, pray, meditate, and get through something and just keep on keeping on in that hope. So church was a big deal for me. My very first job was working, and you see it in the film, was I was working as a waiter. And I was really, that was a desperation point when I walked into the Black Bear Diner where I eventually got a job. I handed in my application, and the manager at the time, he was looking at it, and he had this really dumb look on his face. He's like, "Do you have any current current job work history?" And I just broke it down to him, and just in being vulnerable and honest, I said, "You know what? I just got out of prison." And that led to an hour-long conversation with him. And he said, "Hey, I want you to come back tomorrow." And we ended up having another hour-long conversation. And the thing that really got me the job was that honesty with him and telling him, this is who I was, this is where I am, this is the crime I committed, and so on and so forth. But it's really that honesty of telling people about who I am has been the number one thing that's brought me back out into society. It took me years, but I finally am working at a job that I love, drug and alcohol counseling. And there's just this whole new uh, hope in my own life, especially over the past several years, is that not only am I working in something that I love, but I got married about a year and a half ago, and I'm still the ministry leader for Celebrate Recovery, which is a recovery at my church. So it's just it's hope upon hope and grace upon grace. And I just, I'm so thankful for all of it.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think that really speaks to the need for like second chance employers and businesses that are really willing um to employ directly impacted individuals despite their past. And um obviously you see really great outcomes all the way around. So that's really neat.
Yay, thank you.
Well, with a few minutes left, I'm going to turn it over to Brenton for our final question. So Brenton, reentry policies are clearly an important tool in helping to address overcriminalization in America, but we often think about it as an action that occurs after a person's been left in jail jail or prison, instead of measures that can be taken as soon as somebody arrives in the carceral system.
Mm,
And I think it's really great to see programs like OMCP that are working to make sure an individual is ready and supported to reintegrate into society as soon as their time is done.
mhm.
So what do you see are some reoccurring needs for returning individuals? And as advocates, what are ways that we can support individuals in their reentry journey, both while they're incarcerated and once they've returned home?
Yeah, that's a big and great question. I mean, I think first of all, I'll go back to even the initial question that you asked Sol, or the second question you asked Sol a little while ago about kind of around what it takes to get a program like this going. And a lot of it is political will and therefore money, right? And I think just to realize, like I pulled this up, if you saw me looking down, it's because I need to pull a stat up. But, I think what's really fascinating about something like this is that for every dollar spent on prison education, it saves $5 on reentry costs, um, or reincarceration costs, I should say. So that in itself, it's not just that you see people's life change, communities change, a ripple effect that you're seeing now in the community because people like Al Roensch are out there supporting folks on the margins heal. That's a beautiful ripple effect, but it's also like dollars and cents that really make a lot of sense, right? So I think when it comes, as we know, our political systems, our private systems are very much tied up in this idea of financial return or risk adverse based on something financially grounded. And so I think that's, first of all, really important to establish. I think secondly, it's just like, I think one of the most important things and places to start in the conversation is to have more broadly is that, like, let's pick people over prisons, people over punitive measures. And because not only is it the right thing to do, if we want to believe in a common humanity that's better for all people, first of all, I think just inherently that's the right thing to do. But secondly, it works. The efficacy of that is proven in these guys, right? And that once again, that there's ripple effects to be had back out in community if we actually believe in the healing potential of people that may have had real significant challenges in their life, may have been victims and victimizers, which into an extent, I'm sure all of us are in some ways, right? So I want to ground it in that idea as well. And I think the last question was about reentering, right? And what can policymakers do to support that as well, right? Akua?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think on that front, I mean, and I think Al and Sol could probably speak to, because everything I get is from these guys, but I'll try to be a vessel for their wisdom. I think I mean, just hearing the stories, and I know things shift in California, things are shifting a bit, but hearing the stories of them being given $200 and, and going to their PO and then going to a halfway house and like, it's good luck from there, right? I think there's something to OMCP that's unique and something, and I'll talk about options recovery in a sec, but there's something that's unique in terms of the vocational aspect, right? You have the parallel process, the therapeutic aspect, but you have the vocational aspect that is tied to a certifying body on the outside. that means real tangible benefits when people go on the outside. And yes, it's still a steep hill to climb because, as Al said, you know, he wanted to go back into drug and alcohol counseling, but it was a hard road, right? And not everybody right away will be accepted and being given and afforded an opportunity to get into that vocation on the outside. But what we see when that happens is, once again, let's look at the recidivism rate of less than 1%. I've also been on panels with this group called Hudson Link out of New York that does a lot of work with Sing Sing. Same for different thing in terms of they focus more on degrees, graduate degrees and such, but those are degrees that come from the outside. So there's something that's actually tangible that has value to the outside world and acts as a bridge. So I think when it comes to policymakers, but when it comes to also different nonprofit organizations, what can be provided and afforded to these communities are a bridge back to the outside. Because once again, as Cameron Clark put so aptly in the film, is that these men and women have the opportunity and the potential, if they go through this healing process, to be some of the most important healers in our society. So I think there's an incredible pipeline of people that could help others if we build those bridges.
Great words to close us out on. Thank you.
Thank you, Akua.
So that concludes our panel discussion, but I want to thank Brenton, Saul, and Al for taking time to contribute to this important discussion today. And although Second Chance Month is coming to an end, I would encourage all of us to continue to work towards championing reentry solutions that will ensure returning individuals have a fair and equitable chance to rebuild their lives and move towards a brighter future. So if you'd like to learn more about Second Chance opportunities, please visit our Second Chances page at americanprogress.org. Thank you for joining us and have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.